Hey guys, welcome to a new edition of Tech Tip Tuesday, where today we are going to be talking about Smart Learning Suite, which is the smartboard tool that is all online. Now, just to kind of start off, this is a tool that I am learning how to use currently. So I will say I am not a pro at this yet. However, I kind of recently learned about this and feel like it's a really great tool to kind of explore and see what you can do with. Now, also to kind of preface this, I love Pear Deck, and I've talked about Pear Deck a lot of different times. And the reason why we're going to look at this today is it's actually very similar to Pear Deck. So Smart Learning Suite Online is a tool that you can use with your smartboard, and it integrates very well with the smart notebook tools that you already possibly are using, or if you're using smart notebook files, it works really, really well with that. If not, it does work well with slides or PowerPoint or even PDFs or other things, but it has an interactive element, a lot like Pear Deck, and that's kind of really the main thing I'm going to focus on today. So first, just to kind of start us off, you need to get on to Smart Learning Suite Online. You need to get your account set up. You're using your same Google account that you use for everything else, so make sure you set it up that way. Make sure you granted all the permissions and just kind of get it all going and set up. And once you are there, you will have a screen that looks like this, where you can kind of get started building your presentations. Now, just a couple things to start. When you're here, across through the center are some different things that you can do where you can add activities, you can explore some of their resources. The training is really helpful. If you click on that, it'll take you to a website where there's videos on pretty much every single little thing you can do with this, and it's nice how it's organized even. If I scroll through this, it'll show some of the presentations I've kind of played with, and then at the very bottom, it does give me some getting started files, which I'm not going to really kind of go through those. So the first thing you're probably going to do when you get here is you're going to click where it says add activities. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to give me a couple options for different things I can add. Now, if I already have a smart notebook file, that's an incredibly easy thing just to upload into here. I would click import resource. I would find that smart notebook file on my computer. I'd put it in, and it would be able to play that notebook file through this and add some interactive elements to it. If I have a YouTube video, I can do that. I can just add a completely new page and start designing from there. But then there's also some of these other things. There's these game-based activities, which are really fun. So it gives your students an interactive game that you kind of build a little bit through basically your own content. There's some different ways to add interactive pieces like this response and shout it out. And then if I scroll down a little bit, there's some of their ready-made resources, which is also really handy. I love the manipulatives. So especially if you teach math or even science, there's some connection for that. So if you click on that manipulatives, you will get a bunch of different manipulatives that you can use. You can also give students access to use this on their own devices, which I'll kind of show you how that works here in a minute. And then there's some other different things that are already there, like the graphic organizers are really great too. Questioning and reflection, really handy pieces that are already put together for you. But for now, I'm just going to import a Google Slides that I made. And I actually did this earlier, so I'm gonna exit out of this screen. So I imported this Google Slides. Also, just to kind of explain how that works, I had a Google Slides presentation already. This is a bell ringers presentation that I use with language arts. From Google Slides, I clicked on File, and then I clicked on Download, and I downloaded this as a PDF in order to import it into my Smart Learning Suite. Now, if I was working in PowerPoint, I could actually just upload it right from PowerPoint, or if I was working in Smart Notebook, I can just upload that Smart Notebook file. But because I love Google Slides and I like building everything through that, to me, that's a tool that works well for me. That is what I used for this. So I'm gonna get back to my Smart Learning Suite. And so now I've got this Google Slides here. Now I want to edit it though a little bit first. So I'm gonna click on my hamburger lesson, or my hamburger menu, and I'm gonna click on Edit Lesson. And it's going to take me to the screen. Now, one thing to kind of know how to know the difference between when you're editing it and when you are presenting it. When you're editing it, your little background area here is white. when you're presenting it, the background area is kind of a really dark gray, blackish color. So you'll kind of know the difference there. So the really cool thing about this, and this is why I love the Smart Online Suite, is the interactive element and the collaboration you can do. Now, I've got this slide, and basically this is like students need to go through and they're going to correct it. Now, traditionally, what I would have done is in class, I'd have this up on the screen. I would have kids raise their hand one at a time, and we'd go through and correct all the errors in this paragraph, and we would go through it that way, which is fine. There's nothing really wrong with that. However, I always notice that there's probably 3, maybe 2 kids that are constantly raising their hands. They know all the answers, and not everyone is really participating in this. So if I want everyone to participate, I'm going to convert this to an activity. So I'm going to click on this Convert to Activity, and I have 2 options. I can either make this an individual activity, which means that each kid is going to do it on their own. They're going to be getting into this on their own device, or I can make it a collaborative activity. Now, the collaborative activity is kind of functions like a shared Google Doc. So if I do the collaborative activity, that means I can either have the whole class be doing it together, or I can assign them into groups, which the group thing is pretty neat, because that way I could have maybe 3 kids working on one, 3 kids working on another, 3 kids, and then it can even become kind of a contest, or it can just be, it's just an easier way to work. You can maybe group kids together that will work well together, or are good at helping each other out. So I want this one actually to be collaborative, because to me, this type of activity makes more sense collaborative. So I'm going to click on collaborative, and right now it just gives me this option. I can continue to edit it, or I can preview it. I don't really need to preview it right now. If I click on preview, it just sort of shows me what it's going to look like. I don't really need to see that. So I'm going to scroll through. So my next slide is actually the answers to this. So I don't need to do anything to that, because that's going to be after we go through and do this, and then I'll display the answers. The next one I have is a vocabulary type of slide, and so what the kids do is they go through and they have to read these sentences and use context clues to try to decide what the words mean. So I want this one to also be an activity. So I'm going to click Convert to Activity, but because this one is a little bit more individual, I want this just to be an individual activity instead of working on it all together. So I'm going to click Make this an individual handout activity. So again, it gives me this option. I can edit or preview. I don't really need to see that. Let's see, let's scroll through. So I've got my answers. So I'm going to go through and do this to the rest of these 2. So my Wednesday one, I also want this to be an individual thing. The Thursday one, I would like this one because this is kind of more fun. I'm going to make this collaborative. And then Friday, the students struggle with the figurative language one, so I feel like it might be better as collaborative. So I'm going to make that one collaborative too. Okay, so I've got this set up. And this is, like I said, this is a bell ringers type of thing. So I wouldn't normally go through all 5 of these days on the same day. Obviously, we're going to do one day at a time, but this just sort of gets it set up. So I'm going to say I'm finished editing, and now it's going to take me back to my presentation. And one little trick, something I always like to do with these, I don't like to be able to see this little bar up here at the top. I like to have as much space possible on my screen. I don't want to be wasting. We paid a lot of money for these things. I don't want to waste that bar up at the top. So on my keyboard, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click F11. And F11 makes my screen full. So then I am not losing any of my screen space. And so that's just kind of a little trick to know. So I have this set up so that we can do this collaboratively. But before I can start doing this, I need to get students on this presentation. So we're going to talk about that really quick. And I'm going to click on this little icon that looks like people. And right now it does show me I have a test student. I have a test student account and I've already got that one logged in. But if I want to get the rest of my students here, I'm going to click on this little pop-out menu, and it gives some directions. So the kids are going to open up a browser. They're going to type hellosmart.com, and then this is their class ID. Now, the very first time you do this, it does require the student to log in with their Google account and make sure they get the class ID put in, and it's there. However, once you have this as a routine, and as you've got this going with the devices, it's no longer really this many steps, and they can just open up the browser, go to the link, and it kind of automatically gets them there. If you are working with students on iPads, I would highly recommend going through all your students' iPads and either instructing them how to do this or you doing this, where you open up the browser and go to hellosmart.com and put that in as a desktop icon. So it's a quick link to it. That's a very easy way. So all they have to do is click on that link on their iPad and it takes them here. If you are with kids on a Chromebook, they can bookmark hellosmart.com because if you're going to use this, you're probably going to use it relatively regularly. So anyway, so you would have the students go to that. They're going to type in the class ID and make sure they're all logged in, because it does have to log in with their Google account. That's how you know who is doing what on the screen, and then you're good to go. All right, so I currently have this set up so where I am showing two different student screens, and I am also showing my screen. So I know I just kind of talked about sort of saving space on your screen, but for the sake of showing all this in one thing, this is just sort of the easiest way for me to set this up. So I have on the teacher display, or what would be showing on my main display in my classroom, it just sort of has the slide and it's kind of grayed over and it says setup. Now this is one that I put in, remember, as a collaborative activity. So right now for the students, it just sort of says, you know, we're not running this activity right now. So when they're on their own device, that's what they see. And maybe at this point, it's when I'm going to give them some directions on how this works. But I'm going to click on setup. And then I have the option, because I set this up as a collaborative activity, I can either have the whole class work on this together, or I can put them in groups. The neat thing is too, is if I select groups and I look at my class, I'm like, okay, I need to divide this into 4 groups. And if I choose 4 isn't an option because I don't even have 4 kids in this class right now. There's only 2, but if I put 4, it would automatically like randomly assign them groups, which is kind of nice, but then you can adjust it too. So if you do need kids, like you want them because they're sitting close together, working together, you can adjust it. But the nice thing is it does randomly put them together. So then you don't have to deal with, you know, oh, I don't like so-and-so, or I don't want to work with so-and-so. It's just, well, that's how it picked it, so that's what you get. So it does do that randomly. But I am just going to say everyone on one team, since I just have 2 people, and then we'll go from there. So once I click that, now on the student screens, it's showing them the screen that shows all of these different things that they're supposed to correct. And then on my screen, I have the same thing. Now, if I go through as a teacher and I'm going to click on my little pencil tool, which kind of as a side note, you'll see there's these little dots right here for all of their screen and mine. It's just because I have everything scrunched in kind of small. Normally you would see those tools and you don't have to click on that little menu, but because it's all squeezed together, that's there. But anyway, so we've got our tools, and so I want to just draw with the pencil. And I would often, when I do it this way, when we're going to do stuff collaboratively, I would assign students a color. You can still see as they go about, you'll be able to click on stuff and see who did what. But it's kind of nice just to give kids a color. So I would say, okay, I'm going to write in blue, and I'll assign this person, I'll say, okay, I'd like you to write in green, and this person, I'm gonna say, okay, I'd like you to write in purple. And you can click on that little menu to get more color options, but those are just sort of the default ones that are there. You can also change the thickness, so if I want it to be thicker or extra thick, you can do that. I'm gonna keep it on the thin one for now. So what they need to do is go through and correct errors. So if I kind of go through and I first say, okay, I'm going to correct the first one for you. We know that Google should have an apostrophe. So that was kind of off, but we know that that is one thing. So I'll kind of circle and say, okay, that's the first error that we're correcting. Right away, it shows what I just did on the students' devices. So they immediately see anything that I did up here. Now, if I have this kid and they're gonna just start correcting errors on their own, but they're working together, so this person's with their green, and they look through this and they say, oh, this is the wrong version of there, so they're gonna circle there, and of course, hopefully theirs isn't so tiny, and they're gonna say, okay, it should really be there with an apostrophe. Automatically that showed up both on my main screen, so I am seeing it. It also shows up on the other student. So the students are able to see what each other does as they do it. Kind of like I said, it's kind of like a Google Doc. When you're working collaboratively, they can see what they do as they go. Okay, so maybe this student, they are looking at it and they see, oh, it should really say, instead of first, we want it to be spelled, it really should be spelled out. Oh, sorry, this is so tiny. And my handwriting is terrible on that. So they went through and they corrected that. So again, it shows up on all the screens. Now, one really nice thing on the teacher end, so if I'm looking at this and I see this kid goes through and they just, scribble, and I'm like, okay, that's not what we're doing. This is not how you're supposed to be doing this. And so this also incorporates digital citizenship, because we can talk about, accountability using technology and just, being responsible and things like that. So on the teacher end, I can see, oh man, someone just scribbled all over. If I click on that, okay, so it shows that it is selected. I've got this little blue drop down. It shows me right away who did that. So I can see immediately, okay, this test student scribbled on there, so I can either go to them and talk to them about it. I can just delete it too. Just delete that item, and that's that. So it's nice because it does have that accountability element to it. They can't just draw all over there and it's anonymous. So anything they do when I click on it, so if I click on the there, let me get my made. So we'll click on the actual letter. Okay, so it shows the test 2 student did that. Okay, so I can see what everyone did. So then when we're finished with this, for me, because of the way I have this set up, I would go to my next slide, and that shows us all of the corrections. And so we kind of know what if we got them all or if we didn't get them all. And it shows that on the student screens. And you'll notice right away too, because this slide was not added in as an activity or collaborative slide or anything. They don't have any tools. So for them, all they do on this slide is view it. They can't do anything to it. I could still write on it. So if I look at this and I think, okay, I do want to write on this, and I want to say, okay, so we really, we went through and we did this, and oh, we just missed this one. So I can still write on it as the teacher, but they don't have that anymore because it was not added in that way. So, but it does, like I said, it will show on their screen. Now, one other thing I just want to point out really quick with this is currently we are set up where the teacher is controlling the slides. Now, there's 2 ways you can do this. I can do it that way where teacher controls slides, or I can do it where the student controls the slides and it is a student paced. This is similar to in Pear Deck. A lot of times we switch back and forth between that instructor paced and the student paced mode. So when I am in my instructor view, if I click on my little icon for students here, it shows lesson pacing and it says currently the teacher is running this. But sometimes I might have a lesson where, some kids work through it faster than others, and so I don't want it to be instructor paced. I want it to be student. So if I click on student, immediately on my student view, it just says you can go to any page in this lesson. And so now the students have these arrows, so the students can go through and work on it on their own. So kind of depending on what you need to do, that might be a better method for you, is to do the student paced as opposed to the instructor paced. If you need to be on slides where you're walking your students through each one individually and you're working together, obviously teacher mode is going to be more for you, or teacher paced is going to be more for you. But if you need them to go on their own, the student paced is going to also work. Now, one last thing I do want to add to this before I kind of exit out, and let me get on a slide. Let's see. So the student, we'll just say this student is in student paced, and I'm going to go ahead and enlarge this one just because for the sake of looking at it a little bit better, and we'll F11 just to get that full screen. So when the student is on this, so when we get to this slide, the student has to click start. So they can start working on this slide. And the options are not just to draw. And because I know a lot of people are gonna say that to me, is like, we're working on a Chromebook, all they have is a tiny little touchpad. They can't draw on there very well. It's just not gonna look very good, especially if you're trying to write words. So one thing you can also do, so we'll say we're working on this slide where they're supposed to read the sentences and decide what they think these words mean without looking them up. So, or actually it says to look them up when they're done to see if they're correct. So what I might do is I might instruct them to use the pencil to maybe kind of draw an arrow, because an arrow is not hard to draw with a mouse, and then grab this little text box tool so they can click and then they can just type their answer. And that might have a lot, might be a lot easier to see. So we will type something, we'll type candor. We're not gonna really go through and do it, but that's what the student's answer would be. So they can type it and then it's there. Now on the teacher end, let me get back to my teacher view so you can see what this looks like. So if I was on that slide, let's get to that slide. We're on this one. Okay. And my students are working, there's some students working through this, and I want to be able to see what they have done because this is an individual activity and no longer that collaborative activity. So I'm going to click on student progress. And it's going to show, okay, so I've got one student so far who has worked on this slide. If all of my students would have been working on it so far or have done something, I would see a bunch of these little things with students' names in them, and I could click to see who did what. But since I've only got one, I'm just going to click on that one and it immediately shows me what they did. Now, the neat thing about this too is there is some feedback involved. So if immediately I look at this, my students are kind of working and I see this, I'm like, oh, you didn't finish. And so I can grab my pen and I can maybe circle something, or maybe, oh, they did a great job. So I can, you know, give them a star or something, some symbol to show them that I think they did a great job. So this, and so then that will only show on that student's, or it'll show on that student's device as they're working on it. It does show on my screen because that's what I'm displaying currently. But if I click back to the actual slide, which is clicking on these little arrows here, I can click on teacher handout, and it's going to give me a blank version of this that only I will be displaying. So you can kind of work on it that way too. So if I want my students to work on their own and I want to demo it up here, I can click on that teacher handout to get this. Or I can click on a student to get theirs. And then when I'm ready to go on to the next slide, I just click go on to the next slide. Now, one thing to kind of note too is if we were on this activity, for example, and so this is the one, the students are kind of working through this. Oops, the students are working on this right now. There is this option, if I click on the gear, to end the activity, and that will lock the student screen so they can't edit it anymore. Currently, so if I click end, it ended it. So now on the student end, they can see what they wrote, but they can't change it anymore. So that would be one way, you know, if you want to give them a timer and say you've got to be done by this time, you can be done by this time. Now, the thing about this that I'm not super thrilled about, that maybe they'll change one day, is if I currently click on start, it wants to restart the activity. So once I end it, it's not going to let the students continue, and or they're not going to be able to resume it. So it's going to start it over. So you can obviously do that, but if you want the students to be able to continue to work on that activity, you need to not end it, because ending it makes it so, like I said, you cannot continue once you've ended it. Okay? Let's see, I'm going to click cancel, and then I am going to end this lesson. And now I'm back into my main screen. Now, quick note, if I ended the lesson and my students were still working on activities, when I restart that lesson, their activities are still there. So what I was working through right now was a bell ringer. So I would assume probably every day that week, I would start the day by opening up this file and going through it. So if I opened it up tomorrow and I didn't end any of those activities, but I did end the presentation, it would still have the students' work from the previous days. So you can kind of, you know, keep it going like that. You just have to keep in mind, if you end the activity, if you click that thing that says end the activity, that you can't resume it. Okay. So that is just sort of smart notebook or smart learning suite online in a nutshell. Like I said, there is a ton of stuff you can do with this, so maybe we'll make some additional videos to kind of show different things, because like this video already got way longer than I had planned, and I didn't even cover half of what this thing can do. So, but it gives you a little taste, especially for that collaborative, interactive element of it. I love that. If you've ever used Pear Deck, this kind of gives you maybe an additional resource that's very similar, especially if you use Smart Notebook already. If you're one of those teachers who already uses that, or if you buy Smart Notebook files on Teacher Pay Teacher, this is a really great resource to use, because when you start using those different activity pages, the students can actually move things on the page. So if you want students to have objects they can move on the page, and not just be able to draw and add text boxes, if you're using Smart Notebook files, that's a really great way to go about it. So as always, please let me know if I can answer any questions about this tech tool for you. If you have requests for future Tech Tip Tuesdays, please let me know, and I will go from there. All right, have a wonderful week, everyone.